I'm Robert Emmett Hernan. I'm head of Blue Stack Productions, the publisher of Irish Environment, an online magazine covering environmental matters on the island of Ireland. I'm very happy today to be here near Enniskillen in Northern Ireland with Dianne Little. Dianne, hello, how are you?
Hello, Rob, lovely to see you.
Now, you're with an organization called LAMP. If you could tell the audience, what is LAMP?
LAMP is a local community group. It's Letterbreen and Mullaghdun partnership, and it's a very important group because it works in the community within 3 churches to build peace and relationships and stability in our area following 30 years of troubles and violence. And it works between the Catholic Church, the Methodist Church and the Church of Ireland Church. And it's lovely because they succeed in running events that rotate people around the different halls. So it brings people into other people's environment and it builds trust and stability in relationships. So that's very important work that we do locally.
Now, is Letterbreen and Mullaghdun are local townlands, correct?
Yes.
And when did it start? The organization start?
It's going now about over 10 years.
10 years, okay.
It's been steadily growing, and relationships are growing and getting stronger over that time, which is very good, very positive.
And how many members are there in LAMP?
Well, so there's a committee, but within the churches, across the churches, there would be about 1,000, people around the community, around the area. Yeah.
Okay. Now, you also started a no gas campaign as part of LAMP. If you could explain when that started and in general terms, what that's about.
Okay. Well, we were happily going on about our work, in running things for elderly and normal things that we do for families and community. And up until a couple of years ago, whenever the hydraulic fracking company arrived at 5 o'clock in the morning, under police escort, frightened the people living in the area by coming, at that time of the morning with the police, and people were very alarmed given the history of the trauma in Northern Ireland, things happening in the middle of the night with police lights going and things like that. People get naturally very frightened. So very quickly word spread about what was happening and everything that was going on. And we were asked then as LAMP to host public meetings, and which overflowed the biggest hall that we have. And we had the local politicians, we had people from different organisations to explain to the community who these people were, why they were here. And it was very important to facilitate facilitate that knowledge and to bring people together to act, on the issue.
Now, Dan, what's currently the status of there was a license granted to the company called Tamborian?
That's correct.
And that's the one that showed up at 5 in the morning at first. What's the current status of that license for Fermanagh? Because they also have one in the south.
The license, they had a period of time in which to start drilling, the test drilling, and they didn't get it done within that time. So their license came up for renewal. And when they applied to renew the license, the minister, who we'd been strongly lobbying, announced to us in a meeting with us that license wouldn't be renewed. And that we're very grateful for that, because it lifted the pressure a certain amount off us. But at the same time, that pressure continues because it's in the courts, and apparently, as far as we believe, Tamborian are now suing the government for billions, for their potential losses, and they're even now suing, apparently, the government for having put in a little clause into our planning that is a little bit against fracking. So they're a big industry. They're very aggressively pursuing getting a foothold in our community, but we are very determined that they won't.
Dan, you're in Northern Ireland. The situation is a particular one because of the way in which the government has evolved here, or devolved. I wonder if you could explain to the audience how you dealing with the fracking industry here is slightly different from what is happening in the Republic of Ireland.
Here we find ourselves, our experience is that we are subject to 3 government bodies, which is very difficult for us because, like in England, where it's advancing, you've got 1 government body. In the south, where it's advancing, you've got 1 government body to deal with. Here we have 3. That's very difficult for us. From the UK, we have from the aggressive work of Cameron's work and the Royal College of Engineers that produced a report to say that fracking could be made safe. But of course, those people have shares in the fracking industry, and they got funding from the fracking industry, and effectively, in many sense, they are the fracking industry. And the Public Health England took their word that the fracking could be made safe, and wrote a report which acknowledged a lot of the risks to health, but concluded in many describe as a giant leap of faith to say that it could be done safely because the Royal College has said so. So we have that being used by our Chief Medical Officer's office in Northern Ireland, saying this can be made safe because Public Health England say so. And we will take the guidance from Public Health England.
With no independent assessment from the North?
No.
Okay.
And then, on the other hand, then from the South, there's been a joint operation, where the EPA in Dublin have been funded a little bit by, quite a large amount actually, from the government in the north to host a study to do what is essentially the baseline studies for the fracking industry. But they hired the fracking industry, they hired fracking consultants to do the work, which was incredible. And of course, there's a massive conflict of interest in that. And they're proposing as a next phase, which is currently stalled, but we've no doubt that it will, post-election may advance again. And they're proposing that they come to our community to test our air and our water. So that brings them into our fields and our waterways to do the testing for air, water and our earthquake potential. And that's advancing there, and then that study is supposed to inform policy and legislation. But it is the fracking industry who are conducting that, so we have no faith in that. And again, it isn't considering health, and certainly isn't considering health or social impacts. And the third governing body that we are subject to here is Stormont, our own local assembly. And in that way, it's very difficult because the Stormont Assembly, although they have voted on a vote that they're against it, that hasn't been enacted in such a way to become a firm moratorium to give us any protection. And because the Assembly is so caught up with political issues of, nationalism and unionism and the whole struggle for, opposition and things like that, and flags in the past and everything else like that, they never get around to, looking at this issue to such an extent that they would, move towards working to get a full assessment of the health impacts and a full review of all the health evidence. So, in other words, it's kind of their inactivity is making us vulnerable to moves from both Dublin and London and everything. So we have 3 jurisdictions, so it's kind of very hard to fight it when you've got maybe not such a strong government in Stormont, which is proactive enough to deal with this.
Now, you mentioned, Dianne, about the social and health impacts on the community, and you mentioned some of the issues arising during the Troubles of the last 34 years. And one of the great, I think, values you're adding to the conversation about fracking is that you're focusing on those social and health impacts on the community. There's a great deal of discussion about the environmental impacts, which are very, very important. But could you tell us about how you would define the fragile state of the community in Northern Ireland because of the past violence and histories here? Yeah,
I think that was my main reason for getting involved in this. It's how, my reason, because I have worked a lot in youth mental health and well-being, and have looked at a lot of the issues that are impacting young people in particular, and have worked in suicide prevention and a lot, around that whole area of well-being in the community. And whenever Northern Ireland is a very unique place and has a very unique profile in that it has got very firm statistics of having the highest rate of post-traumatic stress disorder in the world. 30 years of violence, 3,000 people shot, murdered. It's a community that over 2/3 of them have suffered trauma.
Right.
And whenever you look at the impacts on that, you see that we have one of the highest rates of antidepressant dependency in the world. we have, since the ceasefire, and we have more people have died by suicide here than have been murdered in the Troubles. We have very firm statistics to show evidence of this is a community that has been deeply traumatized, and those things are still being borne out. We have a community who's still over 90% are still in segregated education. We have 90% of our social housing is segregated. It's still a very divided community. It's still a very traumatized community. And that's the baseline that isn't being considered whenever they think about bringing in this industry that concerns me most. When you look at what happened in the communities where fracking came in, it is akin to a domestic violence trauma. It is not just thousands of lorries invading to go to thousands of wells, for each well. It's not just the 24/7 noise. It's high rates of domestic violence, it's high rates of sexually transmitted disease, high rates of alcohol and drug abuse, high rates of crime that come into the area. But worse than that is that it's the most divisive extreme energy. So half of the group are set to benefit from work, from a job, although it's short term. To some level they're set to benefit. Maybe they're selling cement, or maybe they're running a pub nearby. But at the same time, within their home, there could be somebody who's pregnant, and obviously we know from statistics that there's a high risk for birth abnormality from this. And it's creating a division and a conflict in a community that is already divided and impacted from conflict. And already we have seen trauma from this. Already we have seen the trucks roll in and security roll in, the razor wire go up, the security, it's all a big operation. Already we have had petrol bombing against the security forces at it. Already our area is crawling in police. Already we have had the threat that the drill may come imminently, and the community are determined that they're going to stop it and faced with mass arrests.
Many people think that the peace has come to Northern Ireland and that everything's been resolved. But talk about some of the disruptions that continue from the legacy issues, the flags, the parades, because it's not over here yet.
No, it's not. It may be an end to active acts, although there are still murders that happen. It may be an end to sort of headline grabbing things like that. But for example, within our young people, all our education is segregated. What they go to the sport, that's segregated. It's has been described accurately as a benign apartheid. And this is an issue that plagues our community, that it needs proactive work by a government. But unfortunately the main parties are often, especially come election time, busy to stir that up, to keep themselves going. And we need a more responsible work to sort of heal in our community. And without that, it's up to us at a community level to do what we can at this level, at grassroots level, to sort of build relationships and build healing. And we do not need the trauma of the fracking industry coming in to our community.
One of the issues with fracking is the huge volume of water being used for it. And is the farming community itself actively opposed to fracking in Fermanagh?
Absolutely. We thankfully, thanks to AFRI in Dublin, we were able to make a film that we've been showing around the area, and we intend to show more of, should the issue come back onto the table again, we've got a good resource there. They are frightened because here in Northern Ireland we have a very pure product, and in the south as well, that's bought overseas with confidence. It only will take one incidence of pollution to remove, to put a mark on our marketable product here. That's a very pure and good product, and that's very, very important. These well heads, 5% of them leak eventually. Over a period of time, despite their efforts to seal them, there is no magic steel, there is no magic cement. All wells will leak in time. So it's like our ground is going to be poisoned for generations.
Has the farming organizations come out and opposed to fracking, or are they staying silent on it, as opposed to the local farmers?
Locally, the farmers in this area where we've been working are aware, and they're definitely against it. Unfortunately, some of the bigger farmer organisations, when we've approached them, have said, "Oh, we'll take advice from the government bodies on it." And but despite people having been and done presentations to them and things like that, the history of those organisations has been to listen to a particular government department and that department to give them advice. And it's very difficult for them whenever previously in the past, when government has been, a Department of Agriculture, Department of Industry have been advising them correctly, for us now to be saying, no, don't do this. If there's government are saying this can be safe, but already in our farm insurance, our new farm insurance policy documents, it has come in, like NFU are now saying, we will not insure you from any impact of fracking. So the insurance companies for the farmers already know what's coming down the line and are safeguarding themselves.
Yeah, insurance companies are no dummies. They're way ahead of it.
Locally, farmers are aware, and increasing awareness is growing. But at the head of those organisations, unfortunately, they're still failing to recognise not only the threats from this, but also their potential, for biogas, and their and understanding that we have to have energy, but there is a good way to do it that can actually sustain our community. If we can get community-owned renewable energy schemes and work with the farmers and get biogas and grow biofuels, that there is actually a very good way that everybody can benefit, and it can leave our community more sustainable and less under threat, because community-owned renewable energy schemes are shown to revitalise communities. And it puts the if you think about how much is being spent, and Leitrim Manor Hamilton area did a very good study on this, each household is spending thousands on fossil fuels already. Collectively as a community, that's a massive amount of money that we could be putting into our community to have community-owned renewable energy. So the profit from what we're spending on energy now stays in the community. That's sustainable jobs, clean, safe, sustainable jobs, clean, safe, sustainable energy.
Is the tourist industry opposed to fracking, or are they also staying silent?
It's again more local, because when you're in this area, you're more aware of everything. But again, at a more regional level, even if it's government led, it's not particularly proactive. But certainly at a local level, there's a very good awareness and a very strong opposition at every level locally against this, because of the recognition that hundreds of 7-acre concrete pads, thousands of lorries, and the image psychologically, at any level, from our current beautiful, clean, green environment to an toxic industrial zone, there's no comparison. So we can't afford to allow this to happen at any level.
And keep the good fight up. Thanks for talking with us.
You're welcome.